Chapter 1: The Strongest Rescuers. The Galactic Disaster Response Corps ranked humans ninth in physical strength. That fact appeared in every recruitment report. The Corps could lift more than twice their own mass. The Vrax could tear open armored pressure doors without tools. The six-limbed Taleri could carry loads that required 2 humans and a powered frame. Even the narrow-bodied Cellin, who looked fragile beside most rescue species, produced short bursts of force strong enough to bend structural steel. Humans were unremarkable. They were stronger than a few light-gravity species, and weaker than nearly everyone the Corps trusted with heavy rescue work. Commander Vrax had questioned their inclusion for years. He questioned it again while watching a human struggle with a training block that a Corps recruit had lifted one-handed. The human's name was Daniel Reyes. He stood inside the Corps testing chamber with both arms wrapped around a rectangular mass of compressed alloy. His face had reddened. The tendons in his neck stood out. His boots slid half a centimeter across the floor before he finally raised the block to the required height. The Corps recruits watched politely. The Vrax did not bother. Vrax looked at the performance display. Maximum lift, 183 standard kilograms. The human lowered the block carefully. Yes, Commander. The Corps averaged 412. So I've heard. The Vrax averaged 360. They mention it. One of the Vrax recruits clicked his jaw plates in amusement. Vrax ignored him. Why did your government nominate humans for structural rescue? Daniel straightened and rolled one shoulder. Because we're good at it. You are not strong enough. For what? Vrax indicated the block. For this. Daniel looked at it. Is someone trapped under that? No. Then I don't understand the question. The testing officer made a quiet sound that might have been suppressed laughter. Vrax did not appreciate it. The Disaster Response Corps existed because planetary catastrophes did not respect borders. When cities collapsed, reactors failed, habitats ruptured, or orbital structures fell, the Corps sent the strongest, fastest, and most environmentally tolerant species available. Its selection process was built around measurable capability. Maximum lifting force, sprint speed, impact resistance, atmospheric tolerance, pain threshold. Humans scored adequately in most categories and exceptionally in none. Vrax had argued that the Corps should replace them with additional Corps-heavy teams. The Terran delegation had responded by submitting rescue statistics. The numbers were irritating. Human teams cleared more debris per shift than almost any species in the Corps. They completed more searches. They evacuated more casualties. They suffered fewer abandonment failures. The data did not match the bodies producing it. Vrax intended to discover why. Again, he said. Daniel looked at the alloy block. You want another maximum lift? Yes. The human adjusted his grip. He lifted it, slower this time. His arms trembled. The block reached the required height. Again, Vrax said. The Corps recruits became attentive. Daniel lowered the block, lifted it a third time, then a fourth. By the 6th repetition, sweat had darkened the back of his training shirt. By the 10th, his breathing had become loud and measured. The Corps recruit beside Vrax shifted his weight. How many repetitions are required? He asked. Until failure, Vrax said. Daniel continued. At 15, the Vrax stopped pretending not to watch. At 20, the testing officer checked the equipment for calibration error. At 28, Daniel's hands began slipping. He stopped, wiped them on his trousers, and resumed. Vrax examined the biometric display. The human's muscle output had fallen. His heart rate was elevated. His body temperature had risen. Blood chemistry showed fatigue. None of that was unusual. What was unusual was how slowly the numbers changed. The Corps produced extraordinary force, but their muscle fibers exhausted quickly under repeated strain. A Corps could lift the block with ease. A Corps could not lift it 40 times. Daniel reached 43. Then he lowered the block and stepped away. Done? Vrax asked. For now. You were instructed to continue until failure. Daniel bent forward, resting his hands on his knees. I did. You are still standing. My grip failed before my legs did. The testing officer reviewed the data. He is correct. Continued lifting risks tendon injury. Vrax looked at Daniel's shaking hands. How long until you can repeat the test? The human considered, with the same weight. Yes. Give me 20 minutes. The Corps recruit turned sharply. 20 minutes. Daniel nodded toward a water station, and something salty. Vrax studied him. The human was exhausted. There was no question of that. His breathing had not returned to normal. His muscles trembled, sweat ran from his hairline, but he was not finished in the way the Korr defined finished. He was temporarily reduced. That distinction remained with Vrax. 3 weeks later, the orbital elevator fell on Kasara. The first section struck the capital at dawn. The second came down across the industrial district. The third wrapped itself around the eastern mountain range and pulled 12 kilometers of support cable through the city like a blade. The first casualty estimate exceeded 6 million. The Disaster Response Corps deployed every available heavy team. Korr, Vrax, Talari, Selen, Human. Commander Vrax arrived believing the strongest rescuers would save the most lives. For the first hour, he was right. Chapter 2, The First Rotation. For the first 47 minutes on Kasara, Commander Vrax Dihal believed the Disaster Response Corps had been right about everything. The Corps reached the ruins first. They moved through the collapsed transit district like living construction machines, lifting slabs that would have required cranes on most worlds. One Corps rescuer planted all 4 feet, wrapped both arms beneath a fractured support beam, and raised it high enough for medics to pull 6 passengers from the wreckage below. The rescue took less than a minute. In another street, the Vrax tore into a crushed maglev car. Their forelimbs produced short bursts of force powerful enough to bend the armored doors apart. Cutting tools hung unused from their belts while they peeled the metal back by hand. The Talari carried medical equipment over the broken terrain at speeds no human could match. Everywhere Vrax looked, the Corps recruitment standards appeared justified. Maximum force opened collapsed structures. Explosive speed reached the injured. Peak performance saved lives. The humans were there too, but they did not dominate any scene. Daniel Reyes helped secure a fractured wall while a Corps lifted the section above it. Another human crawled through a narrow opening to assess survivors. A third organized equipment beside the medical corridor. Useful work, necessary work, nothing that would appear in the official highlights. Then the first rotation horn sounded. A Corps team leader approached the command position, his breathing deep and slow beneath his protective mask. My unit requires recovery. Vrax checked the operation clock, 48 minutes. The request was expected. Corps physiology produced enormous force, but repeated maximum contractions rapidly exhausted the dense fibers responsible for it. The species had never concealed the limitation. Corps doctrine accounted for it. Recovery approved, Vrax said. Second heavy team will relieve you. The Corps withdrew. Fresh rescuers took their place. 9 minutes later, a Vrax supervisor reported that 2 members of his team had developed muscle locking in their forelimbs. Their medics ordered them away from the rubble before the contractions caused permanent injury. The Talari began rotating soon afterward. Nothing about the pattern concerned Vrax. That was why rescue forces deployed in depth. 1 team worked. 1 recovered. 1 remained ready. Then Lieutenant Sesh called his attention to the personnel display. The human teams have not requested replacement. Vrax looked at the markers. Human Team 3 remained active in Sector 9. Human Team 6 remained active beside the transit line. Human Team 8 was still assigned to Sector 12. How long since their deployment? 56 minutes. Have they requested recovery? Yes. Vrax looked at her. You just said they had not requested replacement. They have not. The distinction irritated him. Explain. Lieutenant Sesh expanded the personnel log. Human Team 8 had paused twice. 4 minutes while engineers checked an unstable wall. 7 minutes while a search drone mapped the next void. Individual members had stopped for water, medical checks, and equipment changes, but the team itself had never withdrawn. Vrax left the command position and crossed the ruins toward Sector 12. He expected to find humans ignoring safety procedure. Instead, he found Captain Sarah Aucaffer standing over a structural display with a timer running beside every name on her roster. Daniel Reyes was no longer cutting reinforcement bars. He had joined a debris line. Concrete and broken tile moved from hand to hand through the narrow street. Daniel took each container, carried it 12 meters, emptied it, and returned. Nearby, a human rescuer emerged from a confined space. Aucaffer pointed toward the medical station. 15 minutes. I'm fine. I didn't ask. The rescuer opened her mouth. Aucaffer looked up from the display. You've been crawling for 38 minutes. Your shoulders are slowing. Medical food, then take over thermal scanning. The rescuer nodded and left. Aucaffer turned to another member of the team. Lewis, your grip. Starting to go. Give Daniel the bucket line. Take radio. Daniel heard his name and stepped away from the debris. Where do you want me? Shoring team, low effort until your heart rate settles. Vrax watched the exchange. The humans did not appear to be resting. They were still inside the operation, still dirty, still moving, still carrying equipment and answering calls. But none remained at maximum effort long enough to fail. Vrax approached the human captain. Your team has not rotated. Akafor glanced at him, then back at her roster. We've rotated 6 times. You are all still here? Yes. Then you have changed tasks. You have not rotated personnel. To us, that is rotating personnel. Vrax looked toward Daniel. The human had moved beside 2 engineers and was holding a support brace in position while they secured it. The work required steadiness rather than strength. He has already performed 3 assignments. 4, Akafor said. He started on cutting. Why not send him to full recovery? Because he doesn't need full recovery yet. He is fatigued. He will be fatigued all day. She said it without concern, not because fatigue was harmless, because she had expected it. Akafor finally looked directly at Vrax. The goal isn't to keep everyone fresh, Commander. The goal is to keep everyone useful. A rescue alarm sounded from inside the collapsed structure. Daniel released the support brace only after the engineers confirmed it was secure. Then he took a medical bag from another rescuer and moved toward the opening. Not quickly, not dramatically. He simply changed jobs again. Behind Vrax, the second rotation horn sounded for the Korr. The strongest rescuers on Kasara were returning to the rubble after their first recovery cycle. The humans had never left. Chapter 3, Useful. By the 6th hour, the ruins of Kasara had developed a rhythm. It was not orderly enough to be called routine. Buildings continued to shift. Search drones continued to discover voids beneath structures everyone had believed empty. Casualty estimates changed faster than command could publish them. But within that chaos, the rescue teams had found patterns their bodies understood. Korr units entered the rubble at full strength, performed the heaviest lifts, and withdrew before their muscle output collapsed. Vrax crews worked in violent, efficient bursts, opening structures no other species could breach so quickly. Tal'eri teams carried equipment and casualties across broken ground, then returned to recovery before their speed became unsafe. The human pattern was harder to see. Commander Vrax spent nearly an hour watching Sector 12 before it became obvious. Daniel Reyes began the hour helping move a concrete panel. He did not lift it alone. A Korr rescuer carried most of the mass, while Daniel guided the fractured edge past a support column. Once the panel was clear, Daniel moved to a thermal scanner and spent 12 minutes mapping the void beneath it. Then Captain Akafor called his name. Raise hands. Daniel removed his gloves. The skin at the base of 2 fingers had begun to redden. Still good, he said. I can see that. Akafor pointed toward the medical corridor. Get them taped, then take victim transport. Daniel did not argue. He returned 9 minutes later with both hands wrapped and joined a stretcher team carrying survivors toward triage. The work used his legs and back more than his grip. After 3 trips, he switched again. This time he sat beside an engineer and relayed measurements over the radio. Vrax approached Captain Akafor. You are removing workers before they fail. Yes. That reduces immediate output. Sometimes. Your rescuer said he remained capable of continuing. He did. Then why stop him? Akafor enlarged Daniel's work history on her display. Because capable isn't the same as efficient, and efficient isn't the same as sustainable. The record showed a sequence of assignments rather than a single continuous task. Cutting, debris transfer, shoring, scanning, victim transport, communications, each demanded something different: grip, legs, balance, concentration, patience. When one system starts fading, Akafor said, we move the person before it becomes an injury. Vrax looked toward Daniel. He is not recovering. He is. He is working. Both can be true. That answer sounded contradictory until Vrax watched the next transition. A human engineer had spent 40 minutes crouched inside an access tunnel. When she emerged, her legs shook as she stood. Akafor handed her a bottle of water. Sit at the map table. I can go back in. I know, sit anyway. The engineer lowered herself onto a transport case and began reviewing structural scans. Her breathing slowed. Her legs rested. Her mind remained inside the rescue. 25 minutes later, she stood and returned to the tunnel with a revised plan. No time had been wasted. The human team had simply changed what counted as work. A Korr rescuer nearby had been watching too. His name was Korr, and he was the same recruit who had seen Daniel complete the endurance test weeks earlier. Bran had already finished 3 heavy cycles. Each time, he entered the ruins with strength no human could approach. Each time, he withdrew when his muscles reached their safe limit. He watched Daniel carry a medical pack toward another section. "You have not stopped," Bran said. Daniel shifted the strap across his shoulder. "I stopped digging an hour ago." "You are still performing rescue work." "Right now, I'm delivering bandages." "That is work." "Sure." "Then you have not stopped." Daniel considered this. "I haven't left." Bran's throat plates moved with confusion. "What is the difference?" Daniel pointed toward the recovery area, where Korr medics monitored muscle chemistry. "You need to stop the whole body, because your whole body commits to the lift." He tapped the medical pack. "I can rest my hands while using my legs, rest my legs while running a scanner, rest both while I sit and watch a sensor." "You call that rest?" "Sometimes rest is a bed." Daniel looked across the ruined city. "Sometimes it's whatever part of you the disaster isn't using for the next 10 minutes. Bran remained silent. The answer did not diminish the Korr. His species was still stronger. Without Korr teams, several rescue corridors would not have opened at all. But the humans seemed to possess a broader definition of usefulness. A rescuer did not need to be at full strength. A rescuer did not even need to continue the same job. They only needed to contribute something the operation required. Captain Akaffer passed behind them. "Raise, medical delivery complete." "Almost." After that, food and 20 minutes horizontal. Daniel looked toward the next collapse site. "Captain." "That wasn't a discussion." He sighed. "Yes, Captain." Bran watched him leave. "Your commander orders capable rescuers to sleep." Daniel nodded. "She wants capable rescuers tomorrow." The Korr looked toward the humans moving through Sector 12. They were weaker than they had been at sunrise. Slower, dust-covered, some limped slightly until medics corrected them. None appeared impressive in the way the first rescue hour had been impressive, yet the human section had completed more searches during the previous 2 hours than any other team. Commander Vrax studied the figures. The Korr had always measured what a rescuer could accomplish at maximum output. The humans were measuring how much a team could accomplish before the operation ended. Cassara had not yet revealed which measurement mattered more, but for the first time, Vrax suspected he knew. Chapter 4, The Long Rescue. At 8 hours and 22 minutes, the thermal scanners detected 3 survivors beneath Tower 17. The tower had once contained 40 residential floors. After the elevator cable struck the city, it contained none. The upper structure had collapsed across the lower levels, compressing steel, concrete furnishings and lives into a slope more than 60 meters high. The signal came from deep inside it. 3 heat sources, 2 strong, 1 fading. The command computer calculated the safest route. There was none. Heavy equipment would destabilize the void. The Korr could move the largest slabs, but the access passage narrowed too quickly for their bodies. The Vrax could cut through the reinforcement, but heat from their tools risked igniting trapped gas. Humans could fit. The rubble would have to be removed slowly. By hand, the estimated excavation time was 14 hours. The computer flagged the rescue. Probability of successful extraction before structural collapse, 8%. Commander Vrax had seen recommendations like this before. Disaster command was not only about saving lives, it was about choosing where limited rescuers could save the most. 3 survivors beneath an unstable tower could consume enough resources to reach 30 elsewhere. The recommendation appeared: reassign personnel to higher probability sites. Vrax read it twice. Then he looked toward Captain Akaffer. The human commander did not reject the assessment. She studied it. "How many alternate teams do we have in the district?" 4, answered the logistics officer. "Can 2 cover the probable sites?" "Yes." "Send them." She turned to the structural engineers. "I want a stable route before anyone enters." A human search specialist asked the question everyone understood. "And if there isn't one?" Akaffer looked at the thermal signals. "Then tell me that after you've looked." The humans did not rush into the tower. That was the first thing Vrax noticed. No one picked up a shovel until the engineers completed their assessment. Daniel Reyes sat on a concrete barrier and ate from a foil packet while waiting. A medic examined his hands. Another rescuer lay on the ground with her helmet beneath her head and slept. Korr watched from the edge of the site. "You are resting before beginning?" he asked Daniel. Daniel swallowed. "We're resting because we can't begin yet. The survivors are weakening. And if we collapse the tunnel, they die faster." Bran looked toward the engineers. His own species would have attacked the obstruction immediately. Korr instinct favored direct action when lives were trapped behind weight. The humans appeared inactive. Then Vrax noticed what was happening beneath that stillness. The medics were checking every entrant. The logistics team was staging water, lights, batteries, and replacement tools. Engineers were cutting shoring pieces to measured lengths. Captain Akafer was dividing the rescue into short assignments. No individual would remain inside the narrow tunnel long enough for heat and fatigue to compromise judgment. Daniel would begin on debris, then rotate to exterior handling, then rest, then return on shoring. Another human would enter behind him. A third would monitor air. The team did not plan for one rescuer to endure 14 hours. It planned for the operation to endure 14 hours. The engineers finally marked a route. "Entry possible," one said, "but movement has to remain slow. No powered extraction inside the first 20 meters. Akafer opened the team channel. "Tower 17 begins now. 40-minute interior cycles. Medical check after every exit. No one skips food. No one doubles a tunnel cycle without my authorization." Daniel stood. Bran looked at him. "You will work for 40 minutes. Inside. And then, probably bucket line. That is still work. Different work. And then, food, maybe radio, maybe sleep if she can force me." Akafer's voice came over the channel. "I heard that raise." Daniel looked toward Vrax. "She can." The first human team entered the tunnel. For 40 minutes, debris moved outward one fragment at a time. At the entrance, Daniel passed containers to an exterior line. When his tunnel cycle ended, another human took his place before he had fully emerged. Daniel removed his helmet and sat while a medic checked his temperature. 10 minutes later, he helped assemble support frames. 20 minutes after that, he lay down behind the command vehicle. He slept for 18 minutes, not deeply, not comfortably. Enough. When he woke, Tower 17 was still there. So were the survivors, so was the work. He drank, ate, and returned to the operation. Commander Vrax looked at the rescue timer. 14 hours no longer appeared to describe how long humans could work. It described how long they were prepared to keep handing the task to one another. Chapter 5, The Wrong Measurement. By the 12th operational hour, the temporary physiology laboratory had become the quietest room in Kasara. Doctors from 8 civilizations worked beneath the damaged roof of the central library. Emergency generators hummed between rows of collapsed shelves. Dust drifted through the light from portable displays. Commander Vrax entered carrying the latest rescue totals. "I want to know why the human teams are still effective." Dr. Celia Marin looked at the report. "Effective is the important word." The first display showed physical strength. The Korr remained dominant. The second showed short-duration output. The Vrax led. The third measured recovery after complete rest. Several species outperformed humans. Vrax looked across the charts. "Then where is their advantage?" Celia changed the display. The old graphs disappeared. A new one formed. Useful work completed across 12 operational hours. The Korr line rose almost vertically during each heavy cycle, flattened during recovery, and rose again. The Vrax showed a similar pattern with sharper peaks and longer declines. The Taleri contributed through rapid movement, but their curves slowed as repeated sprints required longer recovery. The human line looked unimpressive at first. It rose gradually. No dramatic peak, no extraordinary burst, but it did not flatten. Even when individual humans rested, the team continued. Even when Daniel stopped digging, he carried equipment. When his hands rested, he worked communications. When his legs rested, he reviewed scans. When he slept, someone else entered the tunnel. The line kept climbing. Professor Hellock, the senior Korr physician, studied it. "The humans are not producing more work per unit of time." "No," Celia said, "they are not more efficient." "Not consistently." "They are not recovering faster." "No." "Then why does the total continue rising?" Celia enlarged the human assignment records. "You are looking for one biological trait." "Is there not one?" There are several modest ones. She listed them. Human muscles tolerated repeated submaximal effort well. Human bodies shed heat efficiently. Their metabolism could draw from multiple energy stores across long activity. They recovered reasonably while still moving. None of those qualities made them invulnerable. Together, they made prolonged moderate work possible. But biology is only half of it, Celia said. The display changed again. Human rescue doctrine appeared. Eat before hunger became weakness. Drink before thirst became dehydration. Change tasks before a specific muscle group failed. Treat blisters before the skin opened. Use structural delays as rest. Use transport time as food time. Sleep whenever the operation provided a safe window. Watch partners for mistakes they could no longer recognize in themselves. Professor Hellock read the procedures. They assume exhaustion. They plan around it, Celia replied. They do not train to prevent fatigue. They prevent unnecessary fatigue. They do not pretend it can be avoided. Vrax remembered Daniel in the training chamber, the trembling arms. The slow recovery, the request for water and salt. The human had not been demonstrating that he never tired. He had demonstrated that fatigue arrived gradually, could be managed, and did not immediately erase usefulness. The Korr testing system measured maximum force, then time until failure. Humans had built an entire rescue philosophy around refusing to treat fatigue as a single moment of failure. Celia highlighted the existing core question. How long can one rescuer maintain peak output? Then she replaced it. How long can a team remain usefully engaged? Every ranking changed, not because humans suddenly became stronger, because strength was no longer the only thing being counted. An alarm sounded from Tower 17. The tunnel had shifted. Work stopped while engineers reassessed the support frames. Vrax opened the live feed. Daniel Reyes sat against the outer wall, breathing heavily. A medic handed him water. Captain Akaffer ordered 2 rescuers to sleep while the engineers worked. No one protested for long. They knew the tower would still be waiting when they woke. Professor Hellock looked at the feed. They are resting. Yes, Celia said. They are still assigned to the operation. Yes. The Korr physician watched Daniel close his eyes beneath the emergency lights. Then, human endurance is not the ability to continue without stopping. No. Celia looked toward the ruins beyond the broken library wall. It is the ability to stop without giving up. Outside, the engineers declared the tunnel stable. A different human team entered first. Daniel continued sleeping. The rescue continued without him. The human line on the graph kept rising. Chapter 6, the 14th hour. There was a saying among veteran human rescuers. No one remembered who had coined it. No training manual claimed ownership. Every generation simply inherited it from the one before. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Commander Vrax heard the phrase for the first time 14 hours into the Kasara operation. He disliked it immediately. It sounded imprecise, almost lazy. Nothing about the rescue around Tower 17 was slow. Thousands of decisions were being made every minute. Air quality, structural movement, medical priorities, load distribution. Every calculation balanced against the possibility that the next loose stone might become the one that buried everyone beneath it. There was nothing smooth about disaster, yet the humans kept repeating it. The rescue tunnel beneath Tower 17 had advanced only another 9 meters. 14 hours of labor. 9 meters. The number offended Vrax's instincts. Elsewhere in the city, Korr heavy teams had already cleared entire streets. Vrax rescue crews had opened transportation corridors nearly 2 kilometers long. Compared with those achievements, the tunnel looked insignificant. Captain Sarah Akaffer disagreed. She stood over a structural map while one finger traced the route toward the trapped survivors. We're ahead of schedule. Vrax looked from the map to the mountain of concrete surrounding them. Your estimate required 14 hours. It did. You have worked 14. We've advanced farther than expected. He stared at the narrow passage disappearing beneath the rubble. It does not appear that way. Akaffer smiled faintly. That's because you're looking at the pile. She tapped the display. I'm looking at the void. The distinction mattered. Every meter of debris removed created another meter that no longer threatened the people trapped beneath it. The tunnel was not measured by what remained. It was measured by what had become safe. Inside the passage, Daniel Reyes knelt beside a fractured support column. His job no longer involved digging. A structural engineer had taken that position 20 minutes earlier. Instead, Daniel inspected the timber braces installed during the previous cycle. He ran a gloved hand across each support, checked tension, listened. Concrete spoke before it failed, not with words, with tiny sounds, clicks, groans. The soft complaint of weight shifting where it should not. Daniel paused there. The engineer beside him stopped working. What? Listen. For several seconds there was only breathing. Then a faint crack, barely audible. The engineer nodded. I heard it. Daniel reached for his radio. Surface, this is Tunnel 1. Captain Okafor answered immediately. Go. We need another vertical support at marker 18. Already moving. No debate, no hesitation. The order had been anticipated long before the request arrived. Commander Vrax watched from the entrance as another team carried pre-cut braces into the tunnel. He frowned. They already had the correct length. Okafor nodded. We expected settlement. You prepared the material before it was needed. Of course. How? She looked genuinely puzzled. Old buildings settle. You couldn't know where. No, but we knew they would. She gestured toward the stacks of lumber, tools, water, batteries, replacement gloves, food packs, medical supplies, and lighting systems arranged in careful rows behind the command post. Most rescue work isn't reacting. It isn't. No, it's preparing for problems before they become emergencies. Vrax thought back to the first day he had questioned human inclusion in the Corps. He had believed rescue depended upon extraordinary acts. Tower 17 suggested something different. It depended upon extraordinary preparation. Brand Corps arrived carrying another steel brace across one shoulder. Even after 14 hours, the Corps remained indispensable. Without them, the heavier structural members could never have been repositioned safely. He lowered the brace beside the tunnel entrance and accepted a cooling pack from one of the medics. Commander Vrax noticed something unusual. The medic was human. The patient was Korr. No one seemed to think it strange. Brand certainly didn't. He accepted the treatment with quiet gratitude before standing again. You may carry one more today, the medic said. Brand laughed. Only one. Unless you enjoy surgery. I do not. Then want. The exchange lasted less than 10 seconds, yet it illustrated something Vrax had begun noticing throughout the operation. The humans did not merely manage themselves. They managed everyone. A Vrax rescue supervisor approached Captain Okafor carrying a digital slate. My crews have reached projected fatigue. How long until partial recovery? 31 minutes. Okafor looked toward another section of the ruins. Good. The Vrax blinked. Good. I need you fresh in half an hour. He studied the map. The reactor district. She nodded. Exactly. The Vrax looked genuinely impressed. You delayed our assignment. I delayed your best assignment. Commander Vrax slowly understood. The humans were not simply rotating people. They were rotating opportunities. Every species contributed when its strengths mattered most. No one was wasted proving they could do someone else's job. The rescue continued through the afternoon, then evening, then into the artificial floodlights brought down from orbit. The city became silver and shadow. Dust drifted through beams of white light like falling snow. Tower 17 remained silent until it wasn't. One of the acoustic sensors chirped. Everyone froze. Daniel raised one hand inside the tunnel. No one moved. Another sound. Not shifting concrete, not steel, 3 faint knocks. Tap, tap, tap. The engineer beside Daniel closed his eyes. You hear it. Daniel nodded. I hear it. He pressed the communicator. Surface. Captain Okafor answered instantly. Go. We have contact. Every conversation stopped. Every machine fell silent. Commander Vrax looked toward the tunnel entrance as the entire rescue operation seemed to hold its breath. 14 hours, 9 meters, hundreds of task rotations, thousands of deliberate decisions. And somewhere beneath nearly 60 meters of broken city, someone was still knocking. Chapter 7, The Voice Beneath the City. The first contact from beneath Tower 17 lasted less than 4 seconds. 3 knocks. A pause, then nothing. No one at the surface spoke until Captain Sarah Okafor raised one hand and pointed toward the acoustic technician. Send the pattern. The technician leaned toward the control panel. 3 controlled impacts traveled through the support frame. Tap, tap, tap. Everyone waited. For several seconds, the tower answered only with settling concrete and distant metal strain. Then the signal returned. 3 knocks, weaker than before, but deliberate. Commander Vrax had heard survivor contact on other rescue sites. The first response usually changed the operation. Crews moved faster, commanders took risks. Families gathered around the perimeter. Hope entered the rescue zone and immediately made everyone less rational. That did not happen at Tower 17. The humans became quieter. Captain Akaffer studied the structural display. Confirmed direction. The acoustic technician adjusted the sensor array. Approximately 7 meters forward and 2 below our current heading. Confidence, 68%. Not enough. She turned toward the engineering team. 2 more sensors inside the tunnel. No additional excavation until we triangulate. Daniel Reyes was still kneeling near marker 18. He looked back toward the entrance. We're close. That is why we slowed down, Akaffer replied. Daniel nodded, no argument. Commander Vrax watched the exchange. He had expected contact to make the humans reckless. Instead, it increased their restraint. A survivor had changed the site from a theoretical rescue into a personal one. The humans responded by becoming more procedural. 2 technicians entered with compact acoustic probes. The excavation team withdrew far enough to reduce background noise. Korr remained beside the tunnel entrance, still wearing the cooling pack the medic had placed across his shoulders. You heard them, he said. Daniel removed his helmet and wiped dust from his forehead. Yeah. You are not continuing. Not yet. There are living beings beneath us. That's why. Bran looked toward the dark tunnel. If my species knew the direction, we would begin removing the obstacle. And if the direction is wrong, we would correct it. Daniel shook his head. Every piece we move changes the load. If we dig in the wrong direction, correction may not be an option. Bran's throat plates tightened. You can remain still after hearing them. Daniel looked at the tools lined beside the entrance. No. He picked up a water bottle. I can drink while the people who know more than me do their jobs. He finished half the bottle, then offered the rest to Bran. The Korr accepted it. Neither spoke again. The second sensor entered the tunnel, then the third. The technicians created controlled pulses against the support braces and studied the returning waves. The void beneath the tower slowly appeared on the display. It was smaller than expected. The survivors were not inside an intact room. They were trapped in a wedge formed by 2 floor sections and the remains of an elevator shaft. The void narrowed toward the top. Air reached it through a fracture less than the width of a human hand. Commander Vrax looked at the reconstruction. How have they survived? Dr. Celia Marin examined the environmental estimates. Low temperature, limited movement, enough air for now. For now, carbon dioxide is rising. Captain Akaffer looked toward the medical team. How long? Celia hesitated. 6 hours before cognitive impairment becomes severe, less if one of them is injured. The tunnel had taken 14 hours to advance 9 meters. 7 remained. Vrax looked at the computer's original estimate. The 8% survival probability had fallen to 3. Captain Akaffer did not look at the probability. She looked at the void. What can we change? The structural engineer answered first. The current route is safe but too slow. Alternative. We can open a vertical access from the north face. Vrax studied the map. That requires removing the upper slab. The slab weighed nearly 14 tons. The engineer nodded. A Korr team can lift it. Bran stepped forward immediately. I will do it. The human medic caught his arm. You have 1 heavy lift remaining. Then I will use it. Captain Akaffer looked from Bran to the display. If the slab shifts laterally, it crushes the void. Bran's confidence faded. How do we prevent that? We don't lift it free. The engineer expanded the structural model. We raise it 4 centimeters. Humans slide supports beneath it. Then the Vrax cut the exposed reinforcement from the outer edge. We repeat until the load transfers away from the access point. Vrax looked at the sequence. Core strength, human precision, Vrax cutting power, Tal'eri transport teams moving supports and tools. No species could perform the operation alone. The plan required all of them. Captain Akaffer began issuing assignments. Bran would lead the first Korr lift. A second Korr team would stand ready not to replace him during the lift, but to take over before his muscle output became unsafe. Human engineers would monitor lateral motion. Daniel's team would place the support blocks. The Vrax would cut only when the engineers confirmed the load had settled. Talari runners would carry equipment between the staging area and the north face. Medical would monitor everyone. The tower site transformed, not into a faster operation, into a more coordinated one. Floodlights moved. Personnel repositioned. Sensors were recalibrated. Daniel sat on a transport case while a medic checked his pupils and reaction time. "You're going on support placement," she said. "I know. You've been awake too long." "I slept 18 minutes. Quality 18 minutes. She did not smile. "After the first lift, you're out for a full cycle." Daniel looked toward the tower. "We don't have a full cycle." "You do." "Doc." Captain Okafor spoke from behind him. She wasn't asking. Daniel looked between them, then nodded. "After the first lift." "After the first lift," Okafor agreed. Verk noticed the compromise, not permission to ignore fatigue, not rigid adherence to a schedule while lives slipped away, a calculated extension with a defined stopping point. Human endurance was not simply continuing. It was knowing exactly how much further one could go without turning a rescuer into another casualty. The Korr took position beneath the slab. Bran planted all 4 feet against the fractured street. 3 others aligned beside him. Hydraulic braces waited nearby, not to lift the weight, but to capture every millimeter the Korr gained. Captain Okafor opened the command channel. "Everyone listens to engineering. If they say stop, we stop. If medical pulls you, you leave. No heroics." Bran looked toward Daniel. "What qualifies as heroics?" Daniel tightened his gloves. "Anything that makes the story about you instead of the people under the building." Bran considered that, then lowered his shoulders beneath the lifting frame. The structural engineer raised one hand. "On my mark." The site became silent. "Load." The Korr pushed. The slab did not move. Muscles tightened beneath their rescue armor. The frame groaned. Dust slid from the broken edge. "Hold." The engineer watched the lateral sensors. "More." The Korr pushed again. The slab rose 1 millimeter, then 2. The hydraulic braces locked behind it. Daniel and 3 other humans moved forward carrying the first support block. They did not run. Running beneath 14 tons of unstable concrete would have been faster. It also would have been stupid. They placed the block, withdrew. The Vrax cut one exposed reinforcement bar. The slab settled onto the support. The Korr released their effort. Bran staggered backward. A medic caught him before he fell. "1 cycle," the engineer called. The procedure repeated. Lift, brace, support, cut, settle again, again. Each cycle gained only a few centimeters. Every species performed a task perfectly suited to its body. The Korr provided force. The Vrax provided power. The Talari provided speed. The humans provided continuity between them. They placed supports, checked measurements, rotated crews, moved tools, updated the plan, and watched the clock. After the third lift, Daniel's hands began trembling. Captain Okafor saw it before he did. "Raise out." "1 more block." "Out." Daniel looked toward the access point. The opening was almost large enough. Almost. Captain Okafor stepped closer. "You promised." For a moment, he looked ready to argue. Then he handed his gloves to the human beside him. "Marker order is written on the left side of the case. Don't trust the old sequence. We changed the 3rd spacing." The replacement nodded. "I've got it." Daniel walked toward medical. He did not look relieved. He looked furious at his own body. Commander Verk followed him. "You are leaving before the rescue is complete." Daniel kept walking. "I'm going to sleep for 40 minutes. "You object?" "Yes." "Then why obey?" Daniel stopped beside the recovery shelter. "Because tired people start believing they're the only ones who can finish the job." He looked back at the mixed-species team beneath Tower 17. They're not. The final slab cycle began without him. Bran had been replaced by a fresh Korr. Another human placed the supports. A different Vrax cut the reinforcement. The operation did not slow. Daniel entered the shelter and lay down. Within seconds, he was asleep. At the tower, the north access widened enough for a search probe. The small machine descended through the opening. Its camera passed shattered flooring, bent metal, and powdered concrete. Then the image steadied. 3 figures appeared inside the void. 1 adult, 2 children. The adult was conscious. One child moved weakly, the other did not move at all. The medical team leaned toward the screen. Captain Akaffer opened the probe's audio channel. "This is the Galactic Disaster Response Corps. Can you hear me?" Static answered, then a voice, faint, dry, human. "We hear you." Every person at the site stopped breathing. The voice continued, "Please hurry." Akaffer looked at the structural timer. The new opening had saved them hours. It had not saved them enough. "We're coming," she said. Then she muted the channel and turned toward the rescue teams. "Now we earn that promise." Chapter 8, The Promise. The voice beneath Tower 17 changed everything. Until that moment, the rescue teams had been working toward signals. Heat, movement, 3 knocks through concrete, numbers on a display that suggested living bodies remained somewhere inside the ruins. Now there was a voice. A person who had heard Captain Akaffer promise that help was coming. Commander Vrax had expected the humans to accelerate. Instead, Captain Akaffer stopped the operation. "Full structural check," she ordered. No one objected. The probe had revealed more than survivors. Its camera showed the void narrowing around them. One floor section rested at an angle above the trapped family, supported by a bent elevator guide and a fractured wall. The new access opening had disturbed the load. Dust fell steadily through the probe's light. The structure was moving. The adult beneath the tower spoke again. "My name is Mara Ellison. I'm with my 2 children." Her voice was weak but controlled. "The older one is Leo. He's 9, the little one is Anya, she's 5. Captain Akaffer knelt beside the audio console. "Are either of them injured?" "Leo's leg is trapped. Anya hit her head when the building came down." "Is she breathing?" "Yes." "Has she been awake?" "Not for a while." Dr. Celia Marin moved beside Akaffer and began asking medical questions. Breathing rate, skin temperature, response to touch, whether the child's pupils looked equal. Mara answered when she could. When she could not, she apologized. "You don't apologize," Celia said. "You keep talking to them, we'll handle everything else." The channel muted. Akaffer looked toward the structural team. "How long?" The lead engineer enlarged the model. "The vertical opening gets us close, but the final passage is too narrow. We need to remove part of the elevator guide." "Can the Vrax cut it?" "Not safely. Too much heat and the guide is carrying load." "Korr?" "No space to apply force." "Human tools?" "Possible slow." "How slow?" The engineer hesitated. 2 hours. Celia looked at the environmental estimates. They may not have 2 hours. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Commander Vrax asked the question Command always asked. "What is the fastest option?" The engineer answered, "Cut the guide and accept the movement." "Probability of collapse?" 31%. "And the slower method?" 11%. Vrax looked toward Captain Akaffer. Every instinct shaped by Korr doctrine favored speed. A trapped child was unconscious. Air quality was declining. The survivors had already waited too long. Akaffer stared at the structural model. Then she asked, "What is moving?" The engineer highlighted 3 pressure points. "The guide is bending under the upper slab. If we cut it, the slab shifts toward the void." "Can we carry the load somewhere else?" "Not with equipment that fits." Akaffer looked toward the core teams, then toward the support blocks beneath the raised slab. "Could we transfer it in stages?" The engineer studied the model again. "Possibly." "How?" "We build a support spine from the north opening to the fractured wall. The core preload it from outside. Humans install the interior braces. Then we cut the guide 1 section at a time." Vrax looked at the projected route. "That takes longer." "Yes." Celia shook her head. "We do not have longer." Akaffer turned to her. "How long can the unconscious child tolerate current conditions?" "I don't know." "That isn't what I asked." Celia looked at the medical feed. "An hour without significant decline." "Perhaps 90 minutes. Akaffer faced the engineer. "Build it in 60. The engineer did not say it was impossible. He began issuing measurements. That was the human response to impossible schedules, not belief, division. The support spine became 6 separate problems. Korr crews moved prefabricated beams to the north face. Talari runners carried fasteners, lights, and tools through the broken streets. Vrax specialists cut exterior sections where heat could dissipate safely. Human engineers crawled into the narrow access and assembled the interior braces by hand. Captain Akafor divided the tunnel work into 20-minute cycles. No one entered twice in succession. No one remained because they felt indispensable. Daniel Reyes was still asleep when the first interior team went in. Commander Vrax noticed his absence. A few hours earlier, he might have considered it evidence that the humans had finally reached their limit. Now he understood it as planning. Daniel would be needed later. The operation did not depend on him being conscious for every minute of it. That was why it could continue. Inside the void, Mara kept talking to her children. The rescue teams heard pieces of it through the open channel. She described the river near their home. She reminded Leo of a school project he had not finished. She told Anya that the rescuers had brought lights. At one point, her voice broke. Captain Akafor answered immediately. Mara, stay with me. I'm here. Tell me what color Anya's coat is. Blue. What does she carry in the left pocket? A pause, a little plastic animal, a bird. What kind? She says it's a hawk. It looks like a chicken. A weak laugh came through the speaker. Akafor kept her talking, not because conversation changed the structure, because endurance was not only muscle. Below the tower, a mother had been holding 2 children together in darkness for more than 14 hours. She had no rotation. No relief crew, only a voice from the surface promising that strangers were coming. The first section of the support spine locked into place. The upper slab shifted less than a millimeter. The second section followed, then the third. At 52 minutes, the engineer announced that the load transfer was holding. At 56, Daniel Reyes emerged from the recovery shelter. He looked disoriented for 3 seconds. Then he saw the tower. How long was I out? 47 minutes, said the medic. Status. Support spine nearly complete. He reached for his gloves. The medic stopped him. Food first. Daniel looked toward the access opening. While I walk. She handed him a ration pack. Captain Akafor met him at the command table. I need you on the final interior cut. Daniel swallowed. Why me? You've worked with the guide material before, and your hands passed the check. Who's second? Jessa Lynn. Good. No pride, no speech. He simply reviewed the plan. Commander Vrax watched the exchange. Daniel had slept while others worked. Now he returned because his particular skill mattered again. Human endurance did not mean denying limits. It meant arranging the operation so a rested pair of hands appeared when the limit became important. The support spine was completed at 63 minutes, 3 minutes late. No one apologized. Daniel and the second human entered the access passage carrying compact saws, cooling gel, and manual clamps. The elevator guide stood between them and the survivors. Through the probe camera, Vrax watched Daniel inspect the first cut point. He attached the clamp, applied cooling gel, started the saw. The sound traveled through the ruins. Mara stopped speaking. Akafor opened the channel. That noise is us. I know. Keep the children covered. There may be dust. The first section separated. The support spine groaned. Every structural monitor spiked. Hold, the engineer ordered. Daniel stopped. No one moved. The load settled. Continue. The second cut took longer. Daniel's shoulders began trembling as he held the saw level in the narrow space. His partner shifted closer. Switch. I've got it. Your line's drifting. Daniel looked at the cut. She was right. He handed over the saw, no argument. She finished the section while Daniel stabilized the clamp. The guide moved. The opening widened. A camera passed through. Mara's face appeared in the light, dust-covered, bleeding from the forehead. One arm wrapped around an unconscious child. The older boy lay beside her with his leg pinned beneath a section of flooring. Captain Akafor's voice softened. We can see you. Mara closed her eyes. Good. The human rescuers entered the void. They reached Anya first. Dr. Celia guided them through a rapid assessment over the radio, breathing present, pulse weak, possible head injury. Daniel fitted the child into a compact extraction sling. His partner began moving her toward the opening. Mara caught the rescuer's sleeve. Take Leo too. We will. Promise. The rescuer looked directly at her. We do not leave children behind. She disappeared into the passage with Anya. The medical team received the child at the surface. For several seconds, no one said anything. Then Celia called out. She has a pulse. Prepare transport. The older boy remained trapped. The flooring across his leg could not be lifted inside the void. Daniel examined it. "Myra, I need you to move behind me." "I'm not leaving him." "I'm not asking you to leave." He positioned a small inflatable bag beneath the slab. It would raise the concrete only a few centimeters, enough to free the boy, perhaps. The engineer warned him that pressure could shift the fractured wall. Daniel acknowledged. Captain Ockafer gave the order. "Inflate slowly." The bag expanded. The slab rose, 1 millimeter, 2. Leo screamed. Mara held his shoulders. Daniel reached beneath the edge and pulled. The boy's leg remained caught. "Stop," Daniel said. The pressure held. He felt along the trapped boot. A bent reinforcement rod had pierced the sole and pinned it to the floor, not the leg, the boot. Daniel cut the laces, pulled the child's foot free. Release pressure. The slab settled, the wall held. Leo was placed into a second sling. Mara tried to follow, then collapsed. Daniel caught her. "You're next." "My children. Already ahead of you." He secured her to the final harness. When the extraction team pulled her through the opening, she kept one hand closed around nothing, as though she were still holding them. Daniel remained behind long enough to inspect the void. Commander Vrax heard Captain Ockafer over the channel. "Raise, exit. Checking for additional compartments. The scan shows none. Visual confirmation. 30 seconds. He looked, found nothing, then withdrew. The final human emerged from Tower 17 at 19 hours and 6 minutes after the disaster began. Medical teams rushed the survivors toward waiting transports. Anya remained unconscious. Leo's leg was injured but intact. Mara refused treatment until she saw both children loaded aboard the same vehicle. Commander Vrax stood beside Captain Ockafer as the transport lifted. "The computer recommended abandoning them," he said. "It recommended assigning resources elsewhere." "You did not." "I assigned resources elsewhere too." "You divided the teams." "Yes." "You accepted an 8% probability." Ockafer watched the transport disappear toward the hospital. "No." Vrax looked at her. "We accepted that 8% was the beginning of the problem." Behind them, the rescue teams were already reorganizing. The Korr returned to heavy clearing. The Vrax moved toward the reactor district. Taleri crews carried equipment to a new collapse site. The humans changed gloves, drank water, checked one another, and waited for their next assignments. They did not celebrate for long. Kasara still contained thousands of people beneath the ruins. The promise at Tower 17 had been kept. There were more promises to make. Chapter 9, the 23rd hour. At 23 hours, Kasara no longer looked like a rescue operation. It looked like the ruins had swallowed the Korr. Floodlights hung from broken buildings. Medical tents filled entire avenues. Vehicles stood wherever the streets had allowed them to stop. Every exposed surface carried dust, tools, cables, water containers, discarded gloves, or exhausted personnel. The city had become a machine built from temporary parts. Commander Vrax stood above the central operations map and watched it continue working. Barely, but continuously. The Korr had completed 9 heavy cycles. The Vrax had finished 11 breach assignments. Taleri runners had covered enough distance to cross a small continent. Every species showed fatigue. Some required longer recovery periods than doctrine predicted. Others had lost personnel to strain, injury, or environmental exposure. The human teams were no exception. Captain Sarah Ockafer had ordered 16 people into full rest. 4 had been transferred to medical. Daniel Reyes had been removed from field duty after a medic detected a decline in fine motor control. He was not pleased. None of that surprised Vrax anymore. The surprise was that the human operation had not weakened with them. It had changed shape. Daniel now sat inside the coordination shelter with both hands wrapped around a cup of something dark and bitter. He could no longer safely enter confined spaces, so he tracked rescue equipment. Another human whose knee had swollen too badly for debris work now managed transport routes. A structural engineer with a strained shoulder reviewed incoming scans. 2 rescuers slept in the recovery tent. 3 others had taken their places. The humans had not defeated exhaustion. They had planned for it to move through the team. Vrax finally understood why their operation remained intact. No individual was carrying it. The system was. Lieutenant Sesh approached with the latest casualty summary. Sector 9 requests additional heavy support. Korr availability. 2 teams in recovery, 1 medically restricted. Vrax. Committed at the reactor district. Vrax looked across the board. In the past, he would have waited for the strongest available team. That was how Korr doctrine worked. Match the task to the species with the highest measured capability. Captain Akaffer stood beside him. What is the obstruction? Sesh opened the report. A collapsed pedestrian span, approximately 7 tons. 2 survivors detected beneath the eastern edge. Does it need to be lifted? Vrax looked at her. It is blocking access. That was not my question. The structural image appeared. The span lay across a narrow passage. A complete lift would require core strength, but the survivors were trapped beneath only one end. Akaffer studied the load points. We don't need 7 tons moved. She traced the fracture line. We need this corner raised 12 centimeters. Sesh enlarged the image. Humans cannot generate sufficient force. Not alone. Akaffer began assembling the team. 2 humans with mechanical jacks. 1 Korr rescuer cleared for moderate exertion, a Vrax technician with a cold-cutting tool, Talari support to move the equipment quickly. The solution was slower than assigning a fresh Korr heavy team. No fresh Korr team existed. The mixed unit reached the site in 6 minutes. Vrax watched through the field feed. The Korr stabilized the largest section. The humans positioned the jacks. The Vrax cut a twisted support strap. The span rose 13 centimeters. Medics crawled beneath it. 2 survivors emerged. The entire operation took 21 minutes. No species involved could have completed it alone. Vrax looked toward Akaffer. You are no longer using species according to their optimal role. We are. The Korr did not perform a full lift. He didn't need to. The Vrax did not breach the span. She didn't need to. Then what role were they performing? The part of the problem only they could solve. Vrax studied the map. The Korr had always assigned tasks by category: heavy lift, rapid entry, medical extraction, structural breach. Human planning did something else. It broke every task apart until no single rescuer needed to be extraordinary. That approach had seemed inefficient when everyone was fresh. At hour 23, it was the only approach still functioning. An alarm sounded from the western residential zone. A search drone had detected movement beneath a collapsed school annex. The location was difficult. The structure remained unstable. Most nearby teams were already committed. Vrax expected Akaffer to refuse. Instead, she asked, "What do we have?" Lieutenant Sesh reviewed availability. 1 Korr cleared for light duty. Use him for initial debris. 2 Talari runners. Equipment and victim transport. 1 Vrax rescuer with reduced grip. Scanner and outer cutting only. 6 humans. What condition? 2 fully rested, 4 restricted. Akaffer looked toward Daniel. He understood before she spoke. You need planning. I need someone who knows how tired people make mistakes. Daniel set down his cup. Then I'm overqualified. He moved to the operations table. Vrax watched him review the team restrictions first. Not the building, not the survivor count, the people. Only after understanding what every rescuer could still do did Daniel begin building the plan. He assigned 1 rested human to the tunnel, another to shoring. The restricted members took communications, air monitoring, equipment staging, and medical coordination. The Korr would remove the first obstruction and then withdraw. The Vrax would open the outer wall, but remain outside the confined space. The Talari would carry tools and, if necessary, casualties. No one was assigned according to what they had been capable of that morning. They were assigned according to what they could safely contribute now. Daniel finished. Captain Akaffer reviewed the plan. Where is your redundancy? 2nd tunnel team is 20 minutes away. That is not redundancy. It's what we have. Akaffer looked at the board. Then she reassigned 1 human from equipment staging. Cross-train her on shoring before entry. Daniel nodded. Good catch. There was no embarrassment, no defense of his original plan. Fatigue had caused an omission. Someone else caught it. That was why humans worked in teams. The Western rescue began. Vrax followed it from command while the city moved deeper into night. The rested humans entered first. The restricted humans remained outside, maintaining air lines and monitoring the structure. The Korr removed a fractured beam, then obeyed medical and left before his strength failed. The Vrax opened an access panel and stepped back. Every species did less than it could have done at peak performance. Together, they did enough. 48 minutes later, the tunnel team found the survivor. One person. An elderly Selene teacher trapped beneath a desk and part of the ceiling. She was conscious. She had used a metal cup to strike a pipe whenever she heard drones. The human rescuers stabilized the ceiling. The Talari carried medical gear through the narrow route. The restricted engineer at the surface caught an error in the support angle before it became dangerous. The teacher reached daylight alive. No one at command celebrated loudly, not because the rescue did not matter, because another alert had already appeared, then another. Kasara kept producing work faster than any one team could finish it. The humans answered by continuing to reorganize. Vrax looked at the mission clock, 23 hours. The humans who had arrived at sunrise were no longer one active shift. Some slept, some coordinated, some had returned after full recovery. Some were done for the day. Some would not return until their injuries healed. Yet the human rescue company remained effective. That was the distinction the Korr had never measured. Human endurance did not belong to Daniel Reyes. It did not belong to Captain Akafer. It did not belong to any particular muscle, lung, or heart. It belonged to the way humans handed responsibility from one exhausted person to the next without allowing the objective to fall between them. Commander Vrax looked across the map. The Korr were still the strongest rescuers on Kasara. The Vrax were still the most powerful breachers. The Talari were still the fastest. And everywhere those extraordinary abilities were needed, human planners were preserving them for the moment they mattered most. The Korr had arrived as a collection of species. By the 23rd hour, the humans had turned it into a team. Chapter 10, The Measure of a Rescuer. The Kasara operation officially ended on the 31st day. The last casualty had been recovered. The final unstable structure had been brought down under controlled demolition. Emergency shelters had replaced field hospitals. The floodlights disappeared. The generators fell silent. The Galactic Disaster Response Corps packed away thousands of tons of equipment and prepared to leave another broken world behind. For most of the rescuers, the mission became another entry in a service record. For Commander Vrax Dihal, it became an obsession. 3 months later, the Grand Hall of Operational Doctrine on Orthia was full. Representatives from 43 member civilizations filled the circular chamber. Korr generals, Vrax rescue commissioners, Talari logistics directors, medical specialists, engineers, politicians, everyone expected Commander Vrax to present the Kasara casualty report. Instead, the first image projected above the chamber showed a simple graph. 2 lines. One red, one blue. No labels, no explanation. The red line rose sharply, then flattened. Rose again, flattened again. The blue line climbed slowly, steadily, without dramatic peaks, without dramatic declines. Vrax let the silence linger. Finally, a counselor asked the obvious question. What are we looking at? Vrax answered, the history of our mistake. The room remained quiet. He touched the display. The red line expanded. Korr heavy rescue output. A second touch, the blue line. He paused. Total rescue output from one human company. Several delegates frowned. A Vrax commissioner spoke first. The Korr line clearly demonstrates superior performance. It does. So why compare them? Because this graph is incomplete. The display changed. The horizontal axis expanded, not 1 hour, not 2, 36. Now the picture looked different. The Korr curve still climbed dramatically. It still represented astonishing strength, but between those peaks were valleys, recovery, medical monitoring. Crew exchanges, necessary pauses. The human line continued upward, never dramatically, never impressively, simply relentlessly. Professor Hellock stood. The Korr physiology has not changed. No. Our rescue methods remain sound. They do. Then what exactly are you claiming? Vrax looked toward the center of the chamber. I am claiming that we have measured the wrong thing for 312 years. The room shifted uneasily. That was not a small accusation. It challenged the foundation of the Korr itself. Vrax continued, we recruit for maximum capability. Images appeared, maximum lift, maximum sprint speed, maximum cutting force, maximum environmental tolerance. We ask what one rescuer can accomplish at peak performance. The next page appeared, blank. We never asked how long the operation lasts. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone in the room had commanded disasters. Everyone knew the answer, longer than anyone wanted. Another graph appeared. This one measured teams. Immediately, every ranking changed. Human companies climbed dramatically, not because individual humans became stronger, because their organizations remained productive. Korr teams also improved. So did the Vrax. So did every species that adopted human-style operational planning during the later weeks of Cassara. Professor Hellock frowned. Explain. Commander Vrax smiled. I invited someone. The chamber doors opened. Captain Sarah Acaffer walked inside. She wore a formal Korr uniform for perhaps the first time in her career. She looked uncomfortable. A council member studied her file. Captain. Yes. Your company produced 27% more successful rescues than statistical prediction. Apparently. How? Sarah looked genuinely surprised by the question. We followed procedure. The chamber waited. She continued. We expected people to get tired. A few delegates nodded. Everyone expects that. No. Sarah shook her head. Everyone acknowledges it. She let that distinction settle. We plan for it. The display behind her changed. Not graphs, schedules, simple duty rosters, colored blocks, different names, different jobs, different times. Sarah pointed. Daniel Reyes. The display followed his assignments. Heavy debris, tunnel support, victim transport, communications, recovery, planning, sleep, tunnel rescue, recovery, equipment staging, training a replacement, planning. Council members leaned forward. One finally asked. He was never assigned to one task. No. Why? Because people aren't machines. Another schedule appeared. Brand Korr, heavy lift, recovery, heavy lift, recovery, heavy lift. Sarah smiled. Perfect. The chamber looked confused. The Korr are extraordinary. They are. So we stopped asking them to be extraordinary every minute. Now another schedule. A Vrax cutting specialist. 3 carefully timed breach operations, nothing between them. A Taleri transport unit, short, rapid assignments, recovery, rapid assignments again. Sarah spread her hands. We didn't change anyone. She looked around the room. We changed when we needed them. Dr. Celia Marin stood next. She carried no charts, only medical reports. For decades, she began, we believed fatigue represented failure. She paused. It does not. She opened the first report. It represents information. Every page told the same story. Hydrate now. Rotate tasks now. Rest now. Treat the blister now. Sleep now. Recover now, not because the rescuer had become useless, because they were still valuable. Commander Vrax looked around the chamber. Cassara changed more than rescue doctrine. Another image appeared, not a graph, not a schedule, a photograph taken 23 hours into the disaster. Daniel Reyes sat asleep against a transport case. Concrete dust covered his uniform. One boot was untied. Both hands were bandaged. Nearby, another human had taken his place inside the tunnel. Further back, Brand Korr rested beneath cooling blankets. Beyond him, a Vrax engineer prepared another cutting tool. No one in the image looked heroic. They looked professional. Vrax spoke quietly. I once believed endurance meant finding the rescuer who could continue the longest. He looked toward Sarah. I was wrong. He touched the final slide. One sentence appeared. The purpose of endurance is not to create people who never stop. A second line followed. It is to create teams that never have to. The chamber remained silent. Then Professor Hellock slowly stood. The elderly Korr had opposed every major recommendation throughout the hearing. Now he bowed his head. A gesture of respect rarely offered outside his own species. We have been training muscles. He looked toward the human delegation, when we should have been training operations. Around the chamber, one representative after another stood, not for humanity, for the doctrine, for the realization that every civilization in the room had left lives beneath rubble because they had believed rescue belonged only to whoever was strongest. Commander Vrax looked toward the gallery. Captain Sarah Acaffer gave the smallest of nods. Not triumph, relief. Cassara had cost millions of lives. Nothing would change that, but perhaps the next world would lose fewer. Years later, every rescue academy in known space taught a new lesson during its first week. Students still measured lifting strength, still practiced breaching techniques, still learned emergency medicine. But before any of that, an instructor would write a single sentence across the classroom wall. Useful people are more valuable than impressive people. Few cadets knew where the sentence had originated. Fewer still knew the name of the human captain who had lived by it. Every one of them graduated believing it had always been obvious. History often worked that way. The best ideas eventually became so ordinary that people forgot they had ever needed inventing. Chapter 11. What Endurance Meant. The galaxy remembered Kasara as the disaster that changed the meaning of endurance. Before Kasara, the word described an individual quality. How long could one rescuer work? How much pain could one body tolerate? How many repetitions could one muscle perform before it failed? After Kasara, those questions still mattered. They simply stopped being the only questions. The Korr remained the strongest heavy rescuers in known space. The Vrax remained unmatched at breaching. The Talari remained faster than any human team could hope to become. Humanity did not replace them. Humanity taught the Korr how not to waste them. That was the real achievement. Commander Vrax spent the rest of his career rewriting the standards he had once defended. Maximum lift remained on the entrance examination. Sprint speed remained. Environmental tolerance remained. But one new assessment appeared. Mixed species teams were given a simulated disaster. Equipment failed. Communications broke. Weather deteriorated. Personnel became tired. The exercise continued for 24 hours. Candidates were no longer judged only by how well they performed their first assignment. They were judged by what useful thing they did when they could no longer perform it. Some lifted, some carried, some cut, some planned, some rested because resting was the task that preserved the next 12 hours. The strongest applicants often struggled with that lesson. So did the bravest. They had been taught that stopping meant surrender. The new doctrine taught them otherwise. Stopping could be discipline. Handing over a tool could be competence. Sleeping while another rescuer continued could be part of the rescue. Humanity had not made exhaustion disappear. It had made exhaustion something a team could survive. Years after Kasara, cadets still studied the recording from Tower 17. They watched Daniel Reyes leave the operation when his hands began to tremble. They watched another rescuer take his place. They watched Korr strength raise the slab. Vrax cutting power open the reinforcement. Talari speed move the equipment. Human planning hold the pieces together. Then they watched Daniel return after sleep, not because he had endured without pause, but because the team had protected his ability to matter at the exact moment his skill was needed. That was the image that endured. Not one human working forever. Not one species proving itself superior. A tired rescuer sleeping while the rescue continued. A stronger rescuer lifting only when the lift mattered. A faster rescuer moving only what needed to move. A team handing responsibility from one pair of hands to the next without letting it fall. The galaxy had once believed strength decided who could save lives. Kasara taught it a more useful equation. Strength determines what can be done once. Endurance determines whether the work is still being done when the disaster has outlasted everyone's first plan. That was why humans became indispensable, not because they never stopped. Because they knew how to stop, recover, return, and keep the mission moving while they were gone. They did not endure alone. They built teams that did.